I am Grady Collane in the CapeCod.com News Center, and welcome to Sunday Journal. I'm joined today by a special guest from the Cape Cod Chamber of Commerce. Can you introduce yourself for our listeners?
Good morning, Grady. I'm Paul Niedzwiecki. I'm the Chief Executive Officer of the Cape Cod Chamber of Commerce.
All right, awesome, Paul. Thank you so much for joining me for this conversation. We had a lot to talk about. Past week has been very busy for the chamber as of late, it seems. But first and foremost, there's been some money that has been coming down from federal sources for the Sagamore and Bourne Bridge replacement project. You've been appointed to a task force for Governor Maura Healey related transportation. These things are tied quite intrinsically. So I think first, just wanted to ask a little bit more about, I guess, this task force. And basically, what are your comments, your response? Is that something you had to apply for, or did they reach out to you? Like, what's your reaction so far?
Yeah, I think the administration reached out to us. They're trying to cover the entire state with this sort of broad transportation funding task force. Obviously, there's a lot of work to do in the greater Boston area around the MBTA,
Mm.
but just looking broadly and generally at the need for infrastructure and transportation infrastructure updates and improvements across the state and the limited resources we have to do that. But this group has been brought together to look at that reality and to examine priorities and potentially alternative funding mechanisms so that we can get our infrastructure upgraded. And clearly, we have the largest single infrastructure project in the state that looks like it's about ready to take place in the form of replacing both the Sagamore and the Bourne bridges. So they felt that our participation was essential.
Hmm. Yeah, that is really interesting. So what is the are you just going to now be on call for them? Is it going to be like monthly meetings? Like how does your work kind of how will that work? Excuse me, how's that going to be cut out for you?
Yeah, we're going to meet the first Wednesday of every month as a full group. There will be subcommittees that are going to break up along the way, and I'm sure that there'll be more meetings associated with that. But the goal is to try to get some sort of report or plan out by the end of the calendar year.
Mhm. Right, awesome. Now, as well, this is tied. So, I mean, immediately it seems like we had some money from federal sources coming down. I don't know if that's somehow, I don't know what bell you rang or if you were immediately set to work on that. But yeah, $350 million have been approved for the bridge replacement project. That's part of a $600 million commitment from President Joe Biden's administration, is my understanding. And that's in addition to a $372 million that had already been approved. So we're getting close to a billion dollars. So overall, do you mind just commenting on that response? It's really interesting to see. Ed Markey and other state legislators were very excited about this. But is it enough? Where are we at now?
We're in good shape. We are in very good shape, and that is in a large part to the federal delegation. Senator Markey and Warren and Congressman Keating have been tenacious, more than diligent in pursuing federal funds for the bridge replacement. So we were notified that as part of a mega application from the bipartisan infrastructure legislation. Right before the holidays, we were notified that we qualified for 372 million. The 350 million that was announced this week comes out of the Congress itself as part of the budget process. I think it was an energy and water bond. And so that puts us in good shape. The big application that was submitted by jointly with the Army Corps and the state in November is for the bridge improvement plan, and that grant is for 1.06 billion. And we're here on that grant in sort of an April or May timeframe. And so when you put that billion together with the 350 and 372, it gets us a little bit more than halfway to the cost of replacing the Sagamore Bridge, just the one bridge. And that puts us in great shape, because given the Commonwealth's match that they put up, we're definitely in the range now where, as part of that bridge improvement, that big $1 billion grant program, we have at least a 50% match identified, which then qualifies us for that $1 billion grant. So it's been a complicated project, as you would expect from such a large infrastructure project. But the pieces are falling together exactly the way that they should. So we're very hopeful and very grateful to the federal delegation that we will hear in April or May that we've got funds to replace Sagamore Bridge and we can start.
That would be awesome. So, I mean, I'm sure the Excel spreadsheets have been hot as of late, trying to figure out exactly where all this money is going to be coming from and when to execute. But all this is kind of with just in mind the idea that we're going to start with the Sagamore Bridge. And my understanding was that the Cape Cod Chamber wasn't enthused by that plan, or at least you wanted to emphasize the importance of both the Bourne Bridge in addition to that. Is that kind of does that still make sense to you? Have you kind of maybe changed your minds? Is that going to be the way they need to kind of go either way? I mean, where are you at now on that?
Um, we just want to make sure people remain vigilant and understand that those two bridges work as one system. When they were built back in 1934, 35, when they came online, they were built to accommodate 1 million trips combined. They accommodate 38 million trips annually now, which is almost equivalent to the Golden Gate Bridge. So we didn't want to be in the position where we would just replace Sagamore and then have to deal with potentially a major rehabilitation on the Bourne, um, which could mean a closure of the entire bridge from 4 to 6 months and single lane or weight restrictions for another 12 to 16 months on top of that. We can't, we won't make that. It doesn't, the system's not going to work that way. There's never been more than, I think, 84,000 trips over the Sagamore Bridge. And even on sort of March 3rd, take that as a date, the crossings over the bridges were 112,000 together. That kind of traffic has never come over in one day on the Sagamore Bridge, and that's in March. So we can't run the risk that we are going to have a major rehabilitation of the Bourne Bridge, or worse, that they find a sheared bolt or something like they did on the Washington Street Bridge in Rhode Island. So that's why we've been keeping the everybody's eyes focused. We're very grateful for Sagamore. We understand the administration's approach and the federal delegation's approach. But I think the 350 that we saw today is encouraging. And the words from the federal delegation are that, maybe we are starting to accumulate enough money here that we can start looking at having some money for the Bourne Bridge. So with that in place, the transportation funding task force happening, and some local efforts that are going to begin here on the Cape, we're going to make sure that we stay focused and that we get funding to replace the Bourne Bridge well.
Yeah, that is awesome. And that actually was my next question is meanwhile in Rhode Island, all of these assumptions and plans have been with the understanding not to undermine the confidence in the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, but surprises do happen. So like none of this is assuming that there might be some kind of unknown issue with the Bourne or Sagamore Bridge that perhaps is not readily known. And suddenly now we're down for another few months, just like we are with Rhode Island. Every day I look at the maps and I see a steadily growing red line where that area has been essentially shut down, say for like 1 or 2 lanes, depending. So the infrastructure is definitely important. But yeah, otherwise, I guess it's just a matter of like, do you just want to emphasize the need to stay safe and have a backup plan B for some of these stuff? And I mean, that's such a huge volume. Would businesses just like shut down? Like, would that legitimately maybe spell the end for certain mom and pop shops if the Bourne Bridge was able to be was put under for maintenance for that long period of time, especially if there was some issue with like a sheared bolt or something considerable like that?
Yeah, if you were to see either of the bridges closed for an extended period of time, it would cause an economic dislocation on the Cape that we've never experienced before. Everybody would feel it. Even if you're a resident, uh, a retired resident that doesn't leave the Cape, that's how it would ripple through everything that we are. There would be a lot of business failures if we had to deal with that.
Mhm, mhm. Yeah, so I guess otherwise we'll just be staying tuned for this. I know that the next steps is going to be a lot of well, finding more funding. We're going to hear. I'm sorry, one more time. When was the $1 billion application? What was that date supposed to be? Hearing more about that?
We're hopeful to hear sometime late April, early May.
All right, awesome. We will stay tuned, and hopefully there'll be some good news on that front. In the meantime, I guess it's also just kind of you setting up for the summer. Speaking of just regular business and commerce, I believe just the past week, you guys have gone through a new kind of a rebrand for like the Cape Cod Truly Yours initiative. Just for people who might not be familiar, having caught our previous conversation on this, do you mind talking a little bit more about kind of what the plan has been for that, and what that Truly Yours is kind of meant to represent?
Sure. We've spent over 6 months now working with Fuse Ideas, which is a company out of Boston that does a lot of branding. And we've noticed like the post-pandemic economy on the Cape is different than the pre-pandemic economy on the Cape. And we're starting to see visitors come back, but we're starting to see more competition. Boston and Cambridge has a tourism improvement district. North of Boston is working on one, so are Plymouth and Springfield. Um, so we're starting to see more competition. Boston already has that money, so we're starting to feel a little bit of a pull on the international travel scene. So we felt it was time. You know, we've got a lot of new residents, the COVID-19 population shift that happened here. So we thought it was appropriate for the Cape to look at what's happened over the last 3 or 4 years and reposition ourselves in the market and to rebrand ourselves. We really haven't done anything like this in over 20 years, and I don't think the Chamber's ever done anything this extensive, because it's not just an effort to rebrand the Chamber; it's really an effort to brand the destination. You know, uh, Virginia has Virginia's for Lovers. Um, New York City has Everyone Loves New York, those kind of things. And so we spent a lot of time. We put together a lot of stakeholders, focus groups. We worked with our Convention Center Bureau pillar quite extensively on this. We looked at 5 different options that were presented to us by Fuse Ideas after all of this. There was also a significant amount of quantitative analysis that was done for people that visit the Cape or people that are likely to visit the Cape. And what came back was a suggestion for our new logo and our tagline, which is Cape Cod Truly Yours, which really gets to the personal nature of the Cape, but the fact that we are a second homeowner community, not just a standard resort community. This is where people come with their families and their friends to make memories. And the Cape can mean something a little bit different to everyone. So the logo itself is really intended to represent a fingerprint. And within that fingerprint, you're going to see 15 strands representing all 15 towns that make up the Cape. So it's now a logo that means something to us and to everyone who sort of looks at it and understands it that way. So we think it's a very positive, forward-leaning effort at rebranding the Cape in a way that recognizes who we really are and the many different things we mean to people that visit.
Mhm. Now, unfortunately, you've piqued my interest with the whole there was 5 recommendations. I'm curious as to what maybe the second runner-up might have been, if they were real stinkers like Cape Cod, Fishy Feelings, or Whale of a
Yeah,
Time, or if it was something more along the lines of, is it
yeah,
dangerous now to say, like, what the other ones were? Because some people might go, "Oh, I actually like that better," and now you're stuck. Is it a dangerous
yeah.
question if I ask for the runner-ups, or would you rather they just
I
no one
think
needs to know?
yeah, if my marketing people were in the room, they would probably tell me not to say anything. Uh, but I can't remember all 4 of them right now. There was one, Cape Cod, sort of timeless was
Mhm.
one, which sort of I guess felt more like that we were selling diamonds than the destination. There was another one that was sort of like more of a Cape Cod for life kind of anthem. Um,
Sure.
that probably is
Mhm.
better as a tattoo than a logo. Uh, so there are a couple like that. There was great variety in it. There was a great discussion on the CVB pillar. So we had over 20 people in the room when we made the final selection here. And I think a lot of people came in like different aspects of different logos and taglines that were associated with them. But in the end, there was tremendous consensus that the fingerprint and the truly yours moniker are the ones that really fit the best.
Yeah, we finally you hit on that once just to shine for you, and it's hard to envision anything else. But it is very interesting, and I guess once again, just kind of goes to show like how much things have kind of changed in recent years with transportation. What is who are we? It was really interesting to read the release you guys sent and kind of think about like the concept of like, oh well, other places that like we're in competition with, and it's like, oh yeah, I guess like we are. It's essentially trying to sell a service, and like of course for people who live on Cape Cod like us, it's like, oh well, this is obviously the best place to be. But it is really interesting to think about some of the other places people might want to go. Can you mention like a couple of other ideas for like where we are in tiers? Like, are we competing with Hawaii in terms of vacation destination, or is it more along the lines of like North Conway, New Hampshire, or like where? What is the kind of layers that you're looking at for like who we're competing with?
True. Well, we looked at a lot of those markets where people were visiting us from, and traditionally over the last 3, 4 decades, the Cape has really been a destination you can drive to. So heavily influenced by in-state visitors, visitors from New England, New York to New Jersey area. It has broadened in its scope, and so we actually get a lot of people from Florida that come up now, which is interesting, and more people from Midwest, Kentucky, Philadelphia, places like that. So that so our reach is expanding, and part of redefining the logo was to recognize that.
Hmm. Yeah, it's very interesting as well. I wonder if things would change if I know that we have the Cape Cod Gateway Airport here, which has done a multitude of upgrades in the most recent few years. But I wonder if do you think there'll be like an investment tipping point where or do you think that like cars and just like the whole idea of like the American road trip is just so ingrained that that's just our thing now? We got the bridges, they're the gateway onto Cape Cod. Is that just really you think like we planning for the future? It's that the Great American Road Trip is the way we should go.
Well, the Gateway Airport is expanded. Is expanding. They have a proposal to extend the runway. American Airlines is going to start flying in this summer, so we'll have both American Airlines and JetBlue. So there is more traffic and employments that are going to be happening at the airport. But we see the investment in those two bridges and that automotive connection to the Cape being that connection that really sustains us and brings people here. And planning for the future, what we're really trying to plan for are a lot more electric vehicles
Mm.
coming over the bridges and making sure that we have enough EV charging stations. And so we've been working with the Cape Cod Commission and the Regional Transit Authority. And we've got a project that we're working on right now just to identify hotels to make sure that hotels have level 3 chargers there a- as part of that effort. So I think cars are part of the future. I just think they're going to run on something other than gas.
Mhm, mhm. Yeah, we've been I could easily do, like, a whole Sunday Journal segment, and maybe we will, just talking about EV versus, like, hydrogen technology, that's been
Yes.
fascinating out in California. But when it comes to, like, the hotel and hospitality industry, like, yeah, we have a lot of Airbnbs, so, like, I have
Yeah.
trouble imagining a future where, like, a local guy who just, like, rents out his, main house, like, in the summertime is like, "Oh, I'm gonna pay to install a level 3 charger for a car that I don't have, but
Yeah.
maybe somebody does that wants to rent my Airbnb." So is that a conversation that you've been having? Is it more targeting, like, larger hotel chains?
Well,
Where's that fall?
yeah, I think when we're talking about level 3 charges, we're talking about charges that can really recharge quickly
Mhm.
within like 15 to 20 minutes. Level 2 charges do a great job if you're going to park there for a long period of time. So, one thing we could do is to require that short-term rentals, for example, that are going to rent out have a level 2 charger available. They're not that expensive. That's one way to get at it. And I think the B&Bs probably fall into that category. So as long as people are parking their car overnight, a level 3 charger probably isn't necessary, but we have to have that capacity built in so that we can serve those people with electric vehicles. Because if you're bringing your family here in an EV and you're staying in Falmouth, for example, and you want to take a road trip to Provincetown, you're gonna have to stop and recharge somewhere.
Yeah, just the sheer strange geography of the Cape kind of starts to create so many issues for EV. Like across the country, it's been so interesting to read, like, oh, EV's the future, and it's like it's very integral. And I just immediately think of like that long C curve from Sandwich up to Provincetown. It's like that.
Yeah.
In theory, it's not that far, but you're not driving across the surface of the Cape Cod Bay. So where are we going to put some of
No.
these chargers? So
Yeah.
yeah, it's really interesting. Going,
And
I mean,
I think most
yeah.
most people think we're just gonna replace gas stations with EV chargers. But that's really not the way that it works. We want to put EV chargers in places where if people are charging, they have something to do. They can actually serve as economic development generators if we're locating them on main streets and other places like that. There's a
Yeah,
real opportunity in it.
it's really interesting. I wonder if are there places like Hyannis Main Street where like some of the just the public parking areas would be good to have the long wires out? Are there some there now or even just talks or conversations about it?
Yeah. The town has some right now, but they're heavily invested in this. So we expect to see more pop up in the Hyannis, Greater Hyannis area over the next few years.
Hmm. It's very interesting. Just in case anyone was confused about whether or not this particular Sunday Journal segment was still about transportation. Oh, yes, it is. It's all tied together. But
Yes.
yeah, so that's very interesting. I mean, as well, we have like electric aircraft, which we're hoping to chat with Dan Wolf sometime soon with Cape Air about. But I don't know. It's like you mentioned before. It's the travel is by car, and that seems to be the future for the Cape. But we're about coming up on time actually. But thank you so much for joining me for this conversation. Is there anything else you wanted to highlight about excitement that you or plans you have for this task force that you're going to be joining, or responses further for the bridges, or just anything else you're gearing up for as the busy summer season looms?
I think we'll have a lot to talk about as the task force starts to generate. We start to hear more from the feds. What I would mention is that we're doing our second Big Blue conference on April 30th and May 1st. We're doing it at the Gateway Airport in one of the older hangars, actually the hangar that Cape Air started in. And the theme this year is it's electric, right? So we are going to look at electric vehicles, the transition of the RTA to electric buses. We're going to have an electric plane there, and we're going to talk about the charging capacity at the airport and the grid. So really on topic with what we just touched on, and anyone that's interested can visit the website and find any more additional information there.
All right, awesome, Paul. Thank you so much for joining me for this conversation. I really appreciate it.
Sure, anytime, Brady. Thank you.